In the jungles of Vietnam, the American soldier fought an enemy he could rarely see. The Viet Cong moved like smoke, striking from the tree line, vanishing into tunnels, melting back into the villages. For years, the Americans wondered what this enemy was thinking, what he feared, what he believed. And then, slowly, they found out. Not from prisoners, not from interrogations, but from something far more intimate. They found his diary. Because the Viet Cong fighter, like soldiers in every war, wrote down his thoughts. And when those small, water-stained notebooks were captured from the dead and the abandoned and finally translated, they opened a window into the mind of the enemy that no briefing ever could. This is the dossier on what the Viet Cong really thought about the American soldier, in his own words. These private journals survived on water-stained sheets of paper, recovered directly from the mud of the battlefield. They were never intended for posterity or political propaganda, but were raw, immediate records written in the heat of conflict. During the war, military intelligence specialist Frederick Whitehurst pulled the diary of medical officer Dang Thuy Tram from a military burn pile. In 1968, the notebook of Lieutenant Nguyen Van Gia was taken from his pack during intense fighting in Kontum. Another red notebook, belonging to soldier Vu Dinh Doan, was recovered in 1966 and spent nearly half a century in America before returning home to his family. To verify these voices, researchers at the Vietnam Center and Archive preserved the physical paper trail, translating the handwritten script of an enemy who once moved like smoke through the tree lines and tunnels. As scholar Nguyen Thi Binh explains, translation is a delicate act of historical recovery. She wrote, "Toi Viet Nhung Dong Ne Jua Ting Bom Roy," which means, "I write these lines amid the falling bombs." These preserved pages provide the evidence that allows the voice of this hidden enemy to be heard at last. Inside these pages, the grand narratives of geopolitics dissolve into the raw reality of the human spirit under pressure. These writings expose frightened young men and women carrying a heavy burden of homesickness, bone-deep weariness, and a constant, quiet terror. In the shadowed canopy of Quang Nhai, 27-year-old medical officer Dang Thuy Tram recorded the agonizing friction between her duty and her vulnerability. "I am grown up and already strong in the face of hardships," she wrote. "But at this minute, why do I want so much a mother's hand to care for me?" For Tram and her comrades, suffering was a daily, grinding environment rather than an exception. They wrote poetry in the mud and noted the names of fallen friends, entirely unsure if they would survive the coming night. Vulnerability and defiance coexisted. In the notebook of Lieutenant Nguyen Van Gia, reflections on family in the North sit alongside stark reminders of military discipline. These fighters doubted, they wept, and they feared death, establishing a fragile human baseline in the quiet of the forest before the true storm of American industrial warfare descended upon them. Lieutenant Nguyen Van Gia observed the American infantryman with the cold eye of a professional hunter. His 1968 entries from Kontum bypass political slogans, focusing instead on practical physical reality. To Nghia, these foreign soldiers appeared soft, weighed down by immense packs, heavy steel helmets, and body armor. They moved clumsily through the dense undergrowth, making far too much noise and relying completely on bulldozed roads and heavy machinery to clear their path. NVA noted that this reliance on machines left them poorly matched to the rugged terrain. By contrast, the guerrilla moved light, carrying only a rifle, a pocket of rice, and a deep knowledge of the forest. This lightness, NVA believed, gave them an absolute tactical edge. That early tactical confidence shattered when the sky itself became a weapon. Archival files and translated diaries identify American air power, specifically the B52 Stratofortress under the tactical designation Arc Light, as the single most feared threat of the war. Flying at 20,000 feet, these heavy bombers remained invisible and silent to the forces on the ground. There was no drone of engines, no pre-strike siren, and no warning. The first indication of an attack was the sudden, violent eruption of the forest floor. A single 3-bomber cell dropped up to 81 tons of conventional explosives, instantly vaporizing entire stretches of triple canopy jungle. For those caught within the target zone, underground shelters offered no safety. The blast overpressure from these massive payloads created intense compression waves that penetrated reinforced bunkers. This atmospheric force killed troops through blast injury alone, rupturing internal organs and causing fatal hemorrhaging without leaving a single mark of shrapnel on the body. Air power historian Dr. John Sherwood, matching declassified Strategic Air Command logs to these diary entries, observes that the scale of this tactical bombardment destroyed any sense of physical sanctuary. In entries from late 1968 and 1969, where dates survive on water-damaged pages, the early confident poetry of the fighters disappears. It is replaced by a heavy, paralyzing dread. The light guerrillas who once moved with absolute freedom through the forest found themselves entirely defenseless against a destructive force they could neither see, hear, nor combat. When the ground settled, the forest fell into a suffocating quiet. Survivors crawled from collapsed bunkers and found their comrades buried alive under tons of churned earth. For days, those who lived could only shake, deafened by the blast overpressure, their bodies trembling from a physical force that ruptured internal organs. This was the horror of absolute helplessness, the sudden threat of being erased by an enemy flying miles above, completely out of sight. This psychological trauma carries a familiar historical echo, mirroring the terror German soldiers recorded under the heavy barrage of American artillery during the Second World War. As trauma historians observe, the bodily shock detailed in these pages, the constant nausea, the ringing ears, the uncontrollable shivering, is the direct result of blast-induced concussion and acute stress. In these moments, the diarists were no longer soldiers. They were survivors clinging to life in a shattered world. The tactical calculus changed on the ground with the arrival of American helicopters. For fighters like Lieutenant Nguyen Van Gia, the sudden whir of rotors destroyed their reliance on jungle concealment. U.S. troops materialized within minutes, landing far behind front lines to isolate guerrilla units. When Nguyen's comrades launched ambushes, rapid reaction forces landed almost immediately, stripping the forest of its protective silence. Medical evacuation flights extracted casualties within 12 minutes, lowering the cost of battlefield exposure. In the aftermath of these clashes, Nguyen examined captured American rucksacks. He recorded quiet astonishment at the contents: fresh rations, advanced medical kits, and clean clothing in quantities that exceeded his entire village's harvest. His entries document an uneasy recognition of a machine that was not only fast, but materially bottomless. These water-stained notebooks are the records of an undefeated people. Every page frames the struggle as a defense of their own soil, casting the American soldier as a temporary visitor who must eventually leave. These fighters recognized that outright victory over a global superpower was unnecessary. Survival was enough. To the diarists, repeated battlefield losses did not cause strategic collapse. Time became their decisive variable, proving that overwhelming firepower could lay waste to the land, but could never erase the political resolve to outlast the invader. Subscribe for more untold histories. These ink-stained pages reveal a timeless truth of warfare. Technology can devastate the earth, but it cannot conquer the silent resolve to outlast it. In the end, survival itself was the strategy. Subscribe for more untold histories.